The next speaker is an old friend of mine named Stowe Boyd. If I could define Stowe in a few words, it would be that he's a contrarian. It's that he examines multiple futures and forces us to think about them in a way that we wouldn't normally. I'm behind time, and like I said, I get a lot of crap back there if I don't make it short. So Stowe Boyd officially is an internationally recognized authority on social tools and their impact on media, business, and society, best known for his commentary on the social revolution. Please give a warm welcome to Stowe Boyd.
Thank you. Well, it's good to be here. I've been asked to talk about a very interesting topic, actually, what will matter in the future. And so my perspective on this is derived from how I've been spending my time for the last years, which is primarily, as he said, working on social tools. But because it's the convocation time of the year and people are giving talks at universities all over the place, I'm pretending that this is a university talk and I'm telling the class of 2012, here's what you should be thinking about. My talk is what will matter in the future. I don't know how to do this. And there's me. My high-level goal is to get you here today to start thinking a little differently, to break out of the rut that's so closely tied to startups, to counter that observation that I heard several times here by Jeff Hammerbacher, which is the best minds of my generation are thinking about how to make people click ads. And I think there's a lot of other things we can be doing. My background and interest is changed over the years. For a long time, I thought of myself as a futurist, but I found that the things that I do that make me happiest or that has the biggest impact with my clients have been when I've been using design thinking to help people attack the future differently. So I'm not a venture capitalist. I'm not right now a startup entrepreneur, although I've raised a lot of money, over $25 million since the 80s, actually. And I've turned a lot of money back to my investors, although I've had a couple of those really monumental failures that are supposed to ennoble you and wise you up. So by that measure anyway, I'm wise and noble. So I think of my work nowadays as speculative design, which could be a talk all by itself, but I'm just going to tell you about it a bit so I can set some context for what I'm doing. Metaphorically, my work is like dropping a rock down an empty mine shaft and then listening to the echoes to try to get a mental picture of the size and depth of that mine shaft. So I'm constantly helping people by throwing a rock, if you will, into the future and listening to what you hear from that. That's a metaphor for speculative design. Oh, by the way, did you see the flying toasters? That's the imaginary appliances that I talk a lot about in my work. I help people think about and imagine hypothetical, imaginary, if you will, objects that help them, rather than thinking about specifically how to design a specific object, a specific web app, it helps them to think about the elements of what they're doing. Who are the people? What are the cultural barriers and limitations that we're confronted with? This is a really pretty good definition, I won't read it, by Nikhil Mitter, that has a great element of it. It talks about the fluctuation, iteration, reflection pattern of helping people by posing, in a sense, complicated or perplexing questions in the form of an imagined hypothetical object. I'm going to talk about some of those today. So my purpose here today is to throw some of these things out to help you think about what will matter in the future, or in your case specifically, what kind of things should you be building? What areas of interest, what areas of inquiry are being underserved and potentially have a lot of bang for the future? There's a great line by Alfred North Whitehead. It is the business of the future to be dangerous. So the first thing I want to say is we're going into a new future that is very different. I call it the post-normal. A lot of people have used the term VUCA. How many people have heard this term VUCA, V-U-C-A? Nobody. That's interesting. It's great. You're going to learn something anyway. We're going into a period of unsurpassed levels of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That spells VUCA. So you can't fight this. You have to go with it. So when you're thinking about the near future, think about spiky futures that have enormous discontinuities in them, massively disruptive technologies, sweeping worldwide movements, tectonic eruptions everywhere you look. So don't think safe, think dangerous. Reject the official future. This is the starting point for everything that comes after this. An observation from the recent present: whatever the web touches, it consumes. That's almost a safe thought nowadays. It's almost safe to say. That's mainstream thinking almost. But the web is going to continue to disrupt, and it's going to disrupt everything it touches. And it's time to look farther afield than building yet another check-in service, yet another news aggregation tool, or working to help businesses move their IT onto the cloud. That's all very tame. But there are some huge niches coming. TV, the next wave, what I call new television. I just wrote a report about this. It's available on my website, up at Work Talk. But what about education? Education is 500 years old. The way we do it is completely outmoded. What about small-scale manufacturing? What about grown architecture, where people are growing buildings instead of building them? What about the world of transit, which is incredibly bad? There's a lot of great stuff there. And so I want to characterize a bunch of these things in more detail. And one of the important parts of the backdrop of this is that the world in general is changing from solid to liquid. This is the impact of the web. Print media has already been completely transformed and is continuing to get transformed. And now we have tablets, tablets, tablets everywhere. We've seen the transformation of the music business and dozens of other adjacent areas over the past 10 years. But what's next? What other areas are going to move from cold to hot? It's going to go from slow to fast. And I'll turn it around. Everything that is cold, slow, centralized, and massive can be coaxed or shocked into being fast, networked, and fragmented. Everything the net touches. So a good example of this that actually has a great speculative design element is the political chaos and gridlock in the United States now. And my belief is that this is the function of a transitory freezing up as a function of actually being about to completely turn liquid. Anybody know about how quicksand works? It's what they call a non-Newtonian fluid. It has these really weird properties. You can make this with cornstarch and water, and they're using the same principles in building protective vests. It will flow like a fluid, but when it's struck, it will become solid and become super hard. This is what's happening with the American political system, I think. And the question is, can we cut out the middleman in politics? Do we have to have representative democracies anymore? Or can we go over to a completely web-enabled form of democracy? How many people have heard about the Pirate Party in Europe? They have a tool that's called liquid feedback, which is how they manage themselves internally. So they have direct representation. It's not, they're not voting people into power. They can ask people to take a proxy for them for a particular issue. I mean, it's a fascinating thing. Go look at this app and think about it. It's a tremendously interesting bit of speculative design. Well, for them, they use it on a day-to-day basis, but for the rest of us, it's just an indicator. It's another one of those pebbles in the coal mine. You have to think hard about how it could change things. My friend Jemay Cassio has this great line: technology is everything invented after you turn 13. Right? All the stuff before 13 is just the world. Right? So kids today are going to be confronted with things that we won't understand at all. The killer app of 2017 will run on a platform that doesn't exist yet, won't be called an app. The platform won't be called a platform, and 50-year-olds today would not understand what that stuff is if I could explain it to them now. They just wouldn't understand what it is. The rate of change is speeding up. And I don't mean the next generation of iPhones or even Google Glass. Well, Google Glass is a very interesting thing. It could be an example of speculative design morphing into true design, or it may turn out to be another giant, colossal failure, just like the Newton was. It's a crack in the wall. It's defining the boundaries of something, and it hints at something beyond the near term, the emergence of ubiquitous, or what people call calm technology, where you're not carrying your computers around anymore, not even the little teeny one in your hand. Computing will just be everywhere, and you will be able to connect to it. It runs in the walls like electricity. That's an enormous step forward, and there'll be a million possible ways to play with it. Let me ask a question. What is the biggest killer app in human history? Anyone want to guess? Electricity, that's interesting. No, I don't think so. Fire, close. Cooked food. Cooked food. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, almost millions of years ago, early hominids, before they developed the ability to cook food, had to spend 8 hours a day chewing, just like gorillas. And when you have to spend 8 hours a day chewing, you haven't got time to do anything. So a huge breakthrough. Early hominids invented the ability to boil water or put an ear of corn in the fire, and all of a sudden they evolved very quickly to have much smaller intestines, and they could take a risk. They could actually go out and try to hunt or something, because if they came home, they wouldn't starve to death if they hadn't killed an antelope. So food is fascinating. 40% of the energy in US homes is expended in cooking food. We're using technology to cook food that is hundreds of thousands of years old. And nobody's doing anything about it. Do you know anybody doing anything innovative aside from the microwave or sous vide around cooking food? No. But this is something that hasn't been changed in thousands of years. It's preposterous. The frontiers of the future will be the ruins of the unsustainable. Bruce Sterling, a tremendous line, extremely helpful to help think about things. It's a tantalizingly bleak and oblique wisecrack. And you have to think about it from both real and virtual angles. On the real side, we all try to be good and recycle our plastic shopping bags, but only 5% of the recycled plastic from that is ever used because there is no demand for it. But imagine if people could actually have 3D printers at home and they could just put their shopping bags right into the printer and turn it into condoms or iPhone cases right at home. You don't want a new iPhone case? Bzz. Or a planter or a light shade or fruity flavored sex toys. What can we do with the suburbs when no one wants to live there anymore? The newest research shows that only 10 or 11% of Americans want to live in suburbs now. This is a complete flip-flop from only 20 years ago. Complete inversion. All the rich people and old people or young people are moving into urban centers, and now we have the suburban poor. We're putting our poor people in the place that we have the least systems and services in place to deal with it. Are we going to mine it for the copper in the walls? Are we going to turn the old malls into old age homes? Are we going to just tear it down and turn it into bands of farmland and take the unemployed Americans and teach them how to be farmers? Do you know that 40% of the food that's consumed every day in Shanghai is grown in the city limit? That's a city of, like, whatever it is, 14 million people. They're feeding 5 million people a day with food that's grown in the city. So we know it's crazy to grow a tomato in a California desert and ship it across the country and serve it in New York City that has 45 inches of rainfall a year, but we haven't stopped doing it yet. This is another VUCA thing. We're at the brink where all of the old industrial models of dealing with food are about to fall apart because of drought. Not because we're wise, because the world is making it unsustainable. Kevin Kelly, The central economic imperative of the new economy is to amplify relationships. This gets straight into the heart of what I've been doing for 10 years or more, social tools. In fact, I coined the term social tools in 1999. Everybody, except a very small number of people, thought I was crazy to say that the most important thing of the web was going to be that it was going to build social tools that would shape culture, not speed things up, not make communication more high speed. But there has to be a lot more in our working into amplifying relationships than just another restaurant recommendation tool, okay? We don't need any more of that. 50% of the world's population now lives in urban centers. 50% of the world's population is now on social networks. These are happening at exactly the same time, and they share a common characteristic. They increase social density, which is largely beneficial. There's a lot of downside. 30 million Americans now live alone. Growing trend. Over almost 50% of people in advanced European economies live alone in a home by themselves. An enormous shift in the world. But these people are actually very interesting because even though they live alone, they're more social. They spend more time with other people. They go out all the time. They're very socially connected. And they're more willing to help other people than people that are living at home with larger nuclear families. So we're moving to a world where it's atomic families. How about tools for this increasingly urban and singleton world? Helping people connect to, like, share projects together, like help me paint my fence or build your garden. We're moving past this nuclear family world. So are there things we could be doing there to help us feel more connected, even though things seem to be pulling us more apart? So I have to say something by a Canadian. So I'll quote Marshall McLuhan. He said, "We look into the present through a rearview mirror. We march backwards into the future." So one of the things to take away from this is you can't know the future. You can just play around with models of the future to help you think constructively. And Rachel Armstrong recently said, the problem with the future, the idea of the future, is it's not the future at all. It's really just a continuation of the present. It's a part of our thinking about the present. It's the distillation. The way we think about the future is the distillation of predetermined cultural prejudices and preconceptions. It's not a map. It's not even a good science fiction story. It's just the official future that we've been indoctrinated into. But you can, as I say, you can devise these clever toys to help you fool around, to trick our way out of the corner that we've painted ourselves into. And it might be that the corners with the most paint, with the most complex problems, the most complex problem spaces, may be the most interesting areas of exploration for you in what you're going to build in the future. So remember, when we look into McLuhan's rearview mirror, we're seeing ourselves just as much as the road behind us. And walking backwards into the future means we have to sense our way. We can't see it. And when we're doing that, we're cautiously stepping backwards, throwing pebbles and listening for the echoes. Thanks very much.